I've been reading a book by Marianne Doane called The Emergence of Cinematic Time. And she explains how around 1900, time became palpable. Modern metropolitan life, it became clear, was only possible given the imposition of a standard time. Railways, in particular, demanded synchronization of schedules and clocks. Soon everybody was obliged to wear a watch, a kind of prosthetic device extending the capacity of the body to measure time. The rationalization of time entered the workplace with machines for clocking into work and invaded the body with Taylorist adaptations of chronophotography. In short, time became lived differently, owing to new technologies, including technologies of representation. Jonathan Crary has extended this argument in his recent book. It's called 24/7, Late Capitalism and the Ends of Sleep, observing how technologies of the Industrial Revolution have now been supplanted by those of the information age, which create a homogeneous time of sleeplessness. Well, photography and film have undoubtedly contributed to what I've been calling the rationalization and regulation of time, yet they are also potentially resistant to it. In fact, Doane argues that their indexical nature enables them to, I quote, make possible what had previously been beyond the grasp of representation, the inscription of contingency. As an indexical medium, photography operates partially outside human control. She says it registers without consciousness of registration, and it so enables a special access to contingency. As a consequence, she claims, it is able to rupture the fabric of existence. Now, it's this dialectic of regulation and rupture or resistance that I think emerges with particular clarity in Susan's work. And it was considerations just like this that prompted her to make the series of tapestries and related work. Producing them involved wearing what's called an acti watch, which is a device you wear on your, well, like a watch, which monitors movement. It's actually used in a medical context to diagnose sleep disturbances. So she wore it constantly between 2010 and 2015, monitoring her periods of rest and registering the intensity of her movements. It also recorded ambient light levels. At the end of each year, she sent the data to a factory in Belgium, this makes it sound easier than it was, where the information was converted into color-coded threads and woven into a tapestry on a jacquard loom. The resulting tapestry graphically displays the minute-by-minute record of Morris's activity and rest over the course of the year. Both digital and indexical, the tapestries depict an intermittent subject, caught up in the toils of technology, yet they also register a very particular, contingent, unruly body. Morris spent one of those 5 years of the project also making an unconventional diary. And here, the principles of automaticity and indexicality were also at work. For many of the diary entries consist of computer-generated slips of paper of the sort that ends up in the bottom of your handbag or pockets like receipts and bus tickets and boarding cards and so on. Many of those slips index the time and place that they were acquired, like a photograph recording the exact moment of its exposure. Since the ActiWatch indexically tracks the life of the artist, Morris's work might be considered an electronic form of involuntary drawing or automatic life writing. The watch collects data in the dark, so to speak, digitally registering what would otherwise be an inaccessible behavioral unconscious. Her project is quasi-scientific. It has this rigor and systematicity. And she adopted this mode in an effort to depict a subject drained of imaginary fullness. The I that emerges in the tapestries, as we'll see, is fitfully empty and full, present and absent, and ultra-sensitive to contingent circumstances. Well, the solution to the problem of representing this kind of subject had two sources. Can you see that all right? One scientific, the other artistic. The first was Morris's reading of a newspaper article about Ellen MacArthur, who in 2005 completed the fastest solo circumnavigation of the globe, taking just 7 days. Her sleeping habits, which you can see on the graph, which are just basically a lot of little short naps, were monitored with an ActiWatch. And she also kept a little diary, which you can sort of see on the right. The other source of inspiration, or another, was John Cage's Imaginary Landscape. The piece is a collage of fragments from long-playing records recorded onto tape, and this is a very unusual score for it. 8 simultaneous tracks made from 42 selected recordings. The magnetic tape is conceived of as a sort of receptor surface for a multi-layered, discontinuous recording that is both highly structured, but also completely wide open to chance, or what he called indeterminacy. Morris first explored an analogous sort of recording of her activities using poster-sized, sort of commercially available year planners. This is, in fact, a German calendar, which is bizarre because it doesn't line up the days of the weeks the way we are accustomed to, but starts from June. It's just number, day 1, day 2, day 3. Anyway, so Sundays, turn out to be in very various places on the map. So she filled in various of the blanks in the year planners, or left them blank, absent, both physically absent from the studio, but also perhaps inarticulate, unproductive, psychically elsewhere. And this is one of the year planner silkscreen made from that series. I also thought I'd show you as kind of background works such as this observation project, a project which consists of samples taken from at 5-year intervals, 2005, 2010, and ongoing 2015. The numbers are drawn from environmental data, the times of the high tides, sun and moon rise, lighting up times, and also bodily measurements, pulse rate, blood pressure, fluctuating weight. She said that the latter measurements are flickering and inconsistent, set against the regular and repetitive rhythms of nature and the chronologic, socially organized, timed events. One more background piece. Morris's large-scale tapestries were preceded by this series of Actigraph inkjet prints based on data collected with ActiWatch over short spans of time. This is 3 days and nights in Berlin, and this one in Dartmoor, which seems to have this very long period of stillness. The black is the stillest, I should mention, and red is the most active. So these are sort of ready-made color codes that are printouts that are established by the lab for this scientific diagnosis of sleep disturbance. The bright colors, Morris says, are the trace of my activity in the world. The dark areas, the shadows, are when I'm out of it, sleeping, and quite probably dreaming. What emerges from this series is, as I said, an intermittence of the self. Oh yeah, for those of you who know Susan's motion capture series. This very red area was when she was in Newcastle in the motion capture studio making those. So it's like a whole block of intense activity. Okay. When Morris was awarded the Wellcome Trust grant in 2010 to make new work for the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford, she decided to make large tapestries by inputting data from the ActiWatch over long periods of time, like a year. So this involved the collaboration of researchers into chronobiology, which have described our sleep-wake patterns as being something like a fingerprint, specific to the individual. It's possible, then, to think of the body of work as involuntary, diagrammatic, displaced self-portraiture. This is sleep-wake pattern from 2010, one of 3 tapestries permanently installed at Radcliffe Hospital. So if you can see, the horizontal axis shows the record of activity across 365 days of the year, while the vertical axis traces the variation of activity over each day. So the way this tapestry is configured, night is in the middle. In order for the horizontal, this is quite a large tapestry, and there has to be 365 threads across it to fit the maximum width of the loom. And the vertical axis, there has to be, each day has 1,440 minutes long, and there's one thread allocated to each minute. So it's really very delicate and registers quite a lot of information. So the sort of night sky, this kind of speckled area down the middle, just indicate low levels of activity after dark. So it combines this diagrammatic quality with the intimacy of the index. For example, you can see that there is a very definite time shift. Here, New York. That's what happens to you when you go to New York for a week or so. And then there's this very sad, lonely blue line down here where you can see that Susan was up late. Actually, she was trying to finish a lecture. all during that one night. And that's one thread of a night. The inscription of contingency might, as Doane says, be considered a way of registering the body's resistance to the naturalizing force of institutionalizing and regulating time. Yet Morris's project is also clearly about the effect of rationalization of time in contemporary society and how this conflicts with the biorhythms, things like what's called social jet lag, or in fact literal jet lag. As she has written, the effects of electrical lighting, of organizing ourselves around a working day, and more recently a 24-hour lifestyle, often operate at the expense of our natural sleep patterns. As current chronobiological research shows, the ensuing conflicts risk damage to both mental and physical health. And you could, in fact, regard the ActiWatch as just another one of those devices enforcing, what the chronobiologist called sleep hygiene. These are some details. That's the New York trip, and there's the long night of the soul. This is a tapestry that uses the data collected over 3 years of light exposure only, ambient light exposure, right? And this was intended to capture tension between, artificial, socially imposed rhythms and the natural rhythms of the sun rising and setting, the seasonal changes, as well as the body's rhythms. So this is what she calls a heliograph. You can see this curvaceous figure down the center of the piece. It's configured differently from the one I just showed you. So the top axis, the very top of it, is midnight, 0, 0, colon, 0, 0, and then it sort of flips down to the bottom to 1 minute past midnight, and then there's the rest of the night and daytime, and then the evening at the top. Do you see how it works? So each of the 1,096 days of the 3-year period is shown as a vertical thread. So you can see, the periodicity of the seasons in the northern hemisphere, as well as our typical work schedules. You can see that passing through the 3 summer months and how the pattern bulges and contracts. But it also, the tapestry discriminates between natural and artificial light by registering it in different light levels. So you can see that the morning profile is much more even than the evening one at the top. And that's because Susan kind of like opened her blinds at the same clock time every morning and worked late into the night using artificial light. So that's a sort of different profile for each one. This is a detail. And this is a drawing. It's a wallpaper printed out version of it, which is on this vertical axis. So you can actually see this ghostly figure, which I kind of like. Okay, so this is a recent piece that shows both light levels and activity. It's big. It's 19 feet long in old money, and is again over the 3 years. No doubt, one can get caught up in in detailed analysis of this piece, but I remember the kind of thing that Rosalind Krauss said about Agnes Martin's work, that you should understand them as setting up a kind of dialectic between the objective tactile grid on the one hand, when seen close to, and the subjective cloudy shimmering optical veil when you move away. And that's what I also think is true of Susan's work, that it's really only really appreciated when you move away, and then it becomes something more like a landscape. The 7 different colored silk threads coalesce and shimmer, recalling maybe a distant mountain range obscured by veils of pouring rain, illuminated by a pale green light. I want to say a few words. How are we doing? Not too well. I'm going to have to do some editing on the hoof here, I think, about the diary. One of the 5 years of the project, 2011, she also made this rather unusual diary, an encrypted life writing, which she gave the title De Umbris Idearum, of the shadow cast by our thoughts. In fact, the title is from W.G. Sebalt's The Rings of Saturn, which refers to the title of a rare book. It's mentioned in passing, but the idea of an automatic form of mark-making, like shadow cast by our thought, recurs a few pages later when he has this 2-page spread of 17th century silk merchants' pattern books that contain examples of woven silk. This is a color photograph, so you can see what they're like. He calls them true books of an iridescent, quite indescribable beauty, as if they had been produced by nature itself, like the plumage of birds. Yet the words "as if" in that sentence should be taken with a grain of salt, because a few pages later he reproduces this picture, which is a man at a loom strapped into this pre-industrial large frame loom that looks, for all the world, like an instrument of torture. So it's clear that Szabo's appreciation of these pattern books and their beauty, and yet they're being made for this sort of practical purpose, was quite an influence on her. So the diary, when it's complete, will be 12 volumes corresponding to each month of the year, and is designed as a kind of homage to the Pelican Freud libraries, color-coded Freud's collected works. Of course, it contains much more detail about Susan's life than the tapestries can. But there are very definitely filters at work all the time. As I say, that these digitally recorded systems, receipts, boarding cards, bank transactions, ticket stubs, parking tickets, all those kinds of things. She said that there are many other tracking devices around me that record what I am doing and how I am behaving, that I have no control over, and often do not know about, such as the tracking of my credit card usage or my movement through the city recorded on CCTV or traced back through my mobile phone. So she invokes an image kind of caught up in the trammels of giant network that perhaps evokes that weaver harnessed to his loom, or perhaps also recalls Lacan's image of the subject caught up in the toils of language, a net, a veil. The fine web of language, as Lacan made clear, constitutes a subject that is diffuse, intermittent, inconsistent. As Malcolm Bowie nicely put it, Lacan invented a subject without subject matter. That, by the way, is one of those dreadful police helicopters. So this idea of sort of surveillance comes through. This is an example of a receipt with all the information, including, like the name of the waiter who served you. Yes, I thought, a couple of contrasting examples. I was thinking about sort of diaries in art, as it were. And I thought about Dieter Roth's flat waist. But of course, this is like he collected all the things that passed through his fingers, I suppose, like cigarette packets that were less than 5 millimeters thick. But of course, the materiality of the things he collected is very different from Susan's data streams. I thought sort of more in the spirit, perhaps, of her work might be Mary Kelly's postpartum document, where, in this case, she was obsessively recording and weighing every morsel of solid food that the baby took in, and it's combined with this indexical mark of the result. Also, Moya Davey is kind of an interesting case here, and she wrote an interesting book called Photography and Accident, which invokes John Cage saying, "I mix chance and choice somewhat scandalously." and goes on, I copy this phrase into my notebook, a perfect encapsulation of my own desire for contingency within a structure. So this is the frontispiece to March issue, when there's a newspaper story about the moon reaching its closest point to Earth for 2 decades, kind of recalling Lars von Trier's film Melancholia that came out that year about a planet colliding with Earth. That didn't happen, but there were a number of disasters. The Fukushima disaster occurred that year. So there's a number of sort of ominous news stories, but these also kind of refer also to a kind of internal malaise, anxieties about aging, minor ailments, work, pollution, relationships. There's kind of hypersensitivity. One section of the diary concerns what's called the happiness app. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it promises to track when you're the happiest, and so contribute to your understanding of what makes life worth living. Existential questions are referred to the machine that gathers data and produces graphs. One suspects, however, that this is the sort of self-surveillance that contributes to unhappiness. Inevitably, Morris's work recalls the ungovernable body of the hysteric in the 19th century clinic, but now subjected to measure and confinement of a much more pervasive and invisible kind. So there is confinement, certainly, involved in her depictions of the self, but also a certain ungovernability. Thank you very much.